This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
Greetings one, greetings all. Thank you very much for tuning into this chat featuring Joe Haley from the Tasmanian outfit Psycroptic. The catalyst for the chat is due to the launch of a new album from the lads. It is titled Divine Counsel and it'll see the light of day on August 5th, 2022. If you've tuned in via the podcast apps, I've got a tune to share with you. As usual, I've picked a banger. This one is titled Exodus, and the reason I've picked this one is because we actually talk about it throughout the conversation and tune in to Joe's chops. Holy shit, this guitarist can truly bring it. Masterful. I mean, he and Matt Wilcock. Do you need any more these days than those two? Almost not. So here it is, Exodus from Psycroptic. Once the conversation is finished, I should add, you'll only hear the tune if you're listening via the podcast apps. Once that song is over, we'll dive into the conversation. For all of you people on YouTube, we're going to dive into the chat right now. Let's go. Are you on the road at the moment?
No, not really. I mean, we've got a few shows coming up, but then we don't really hit the road till September. Head to the States then, so...
yeah, you do. Yeah. No, that's
great. So it's just a couple of one-offs. Like I think we've got Alice Springs next week, and then there's like a Hobart show, and then a Melbourne show. But that's kind of it before the big run over in the States.
Yeah, are you coming? Do you plan on coming up here at all? Anytime after the States run with Fallujah?
Like with Fallujah, no, not that I know of. No.
What about you guys by yourselves? You think you'll make it up here? Queensland, that is. Sorry, when I say up here.
Yeah. I mean, the plan is to try and get around everywhere, but I know I suppose it's been kind of difficult the last couple of years, obviously, to get it, to get around and stuff. But our plan is to kind of hit everywhere that we can. We did Sydney a little while back, but hoping to hit everywhere, especially once the album drops. Yeah, we'll try and get around the place.
That was with Maddie and the lads in Werewolves, wasn't it? That show.
Yeah, that was their first show.
Really?
Yeah, it was absolutely crushing.
Yeah,
it's probably the most brutal thing I've seen for a long time.
When Matt told me that was going ahead, I was like, I know, we're not, when I say we're like third or fourth tier, really, aren't we? Us and Perth are sort of on the same ledger in that respect. But God, I would have loved to have seen that show up here. I mean, two of the greatest all-time Australian extreme metal bands, on a bill together, performing. I mean, you guys are just getting better. Let's face it, and the strength and the quality of both of the most recent albums from Psycroptic and Werewolves, just unbelievable power.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah. I think especially with like the werewolf stuff those guys have been doing, I'm pretty sure like I think that all came about like pretty much as a lockdown thing. I don't think they really started until COVID hit. Then I think in that space of time they kind of punched out like 4 albums.
It was something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it started off as a project. But yeah, I guess they were into it, and I think they rehearsed it a bit, and they were pretty stoked with it. And yeah, I'm glad they started doing it live because it's crushing. It's good.
Just talking about the tour with I've spoken to Scott Carstairs before. You guys and Fallujah, perfect match, by the way. I think Fallujah. You guys are certainly well known in Australia, but certainly underrated in a global sense. And I think that's the same for Fallujah in a global sense as well. And Scott's a magnificent guitarist, as are you. So, given that they're with Nuclear Blast, I think they're still with Nuclear Blast. Was it that the management company came together to organise that tour? In other words, can you tell me how that tour came about?
This is kind of this is Dave's realm, pretty much.
Oh yeah,
yeah, he manages that whole side of things. But I think it kind of just works out that like it's more just booking agents kind of just looking out for the tours that are bands that are trying to hit the road at the same time, and just different offers come in, and we just try to line up tee up what's going to work. And I'm pretty sure we just heard that Fallujah were looking. I think they're dropping an album at the same time, or they just did maybe. So yeah, they're hitting the road at the moment. So yeah, it just kind of worked out. And that's usually how it is. Like, it's usually just trying to find the bands that are, touring in support of an album or a release or something like that. And yeah, just try and match up what works. That was just some pairings aren't as good as others, but yeah, like you said, this one's a pretty perfect one.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah, I hardly think any Australian fans know of Fallujah. I know about them because of the interview cycles and what's offered, and I listened to the band's album from 2017 or thereabouts and thought it was crushing, and then they released that one in 2019. I can't remember the name of any of them, but I was so impressed with what they were doing. And then they never sort of took off to the next level. So hopefully for both of you, this tour, because it's across 2 months, isn't it, or a month and a half across all of North America, including Canada, of course.
Yeah, it's a long one. I think it starts like September 15-ish or something, and then goes into October. It's about a month. October. Yeah. So and covers obviously most of the states, and there's a few Canadian dates in there as well. But yeah, it should be awesome. Looking forward to it.
You're a veteran of touring, though, because you guys have done that trek before, which I know can be quite brutal, can't it, in terms of the van, sleeping in the van, and then short turnarounds. Yeah,
like the States was. We've been doing it for a long time. Like our approach for a long time was to try and at least do like Europe and the States at least once a year. Try and cover both. Europe's always the comfortable one because you're usually on like a nightliner. Usually share it with a bunch of bands, but it's like it's a lot more of a comfortable kind of tour arrangement. The States has always been a little bit, it's kind of a little bit harder. But the last few tours that we did, we've kind of got it stitched up pretty well. We've got a pretty good little crew. Like there's just a few of us. Got a driver and. Nice. Sound guy, sometimes merch guy, and we just get an RV now. So for years we were just doing the van thing, where we were just all crammed into a van, sleeping in the van most of the time. But it just kind of worked out that the RV doesn't really cost that much more, and it's way more comfortable. We're all getting a bit older, so we needed to be a bit more comfortable now. So it's. Yeah, not quite as hard as it used to be, but it's definitely a long time to be on the road. But I think we're kind of used to it now, and we're finding it a little bit easier with the way, the kind of the approach that we're doing, how we're doing it now.
Yeah. Do you have a day job? In other words, do you have to sort of take all of your leave in one hit for that sort of thing?
Well, I'm kind of in a position where. Kind of lucky that all my work's music based, So
sweet.
So if something comes up, I could just do it, So you can't see here, but like my day job is just like recording. Like I work in a recording studio.
Of course,
I just like do. Yeah. I've got my studio here, which I do a lot of mixing and mastering in. Playing a cover band, So it's just got a few things. It's all music related, which is
what do you
good.
Play? Because that's what I play in covers too. What do you play? The usual stuff, Jesse's Girl and all the stuff.
Yeah, that's one of them. It's mainly kind of 80s, do a bit of 70s, 80s. Kind of starting to leach into a bit of. It was always the idea was to do like older kind of really retro stuff, but we kind of realised recently that the 90s is like. That's going back 30 years now, so early 90s. So the 90s is kind of starting to creep in there for us. It's a bit different for me with the cover stuff though, because I'm playing drums in that. So it's so it's a kind of a bit of fun for me because it's kind of my drum practice. Get to get up there and play drums.
I'm so heartened to hear that. Joe, you are the first person that I've spoken to that I'm aware of, at the very least, where the subject has come up that actually does that. I've had some people sort of laugh about it and all the rest of it, but I mean, if it wasn't for playing covers, I simply wouldn't have a gig. It's that simple. And look, I have a day job of a journo, but I get to play. God, these days post-COVID, I'm lucky if I sort of play twice a month. But you know, I've got a gig on Friday night at the Wallaby down at Mudgeeraba. But
awesome.
I just love it. I just love the idea of performing 3 or 4 sets. I mean, I'm pretty tired, but, you know, God, you know exactly how it is. I don't have to explain to you how taxing it can be. Probably not as taxing as touring in a bloody van, but it's
it's a bit different, though, because I guess, like, you know, with the Psycroptic sets, you know, we're doing one set, you know, we're just doing, 9, 10, 11 songs or whatever. But like, you know, with the cover stuff, you're doing 3 or 4 sets, you know, playing for like 3 or 4 hours. So it can be just as tiring. It's obviously not as, you know, I suppose not as like punishing to play, but, you know, it's just that, you know, that longevity of a gig, you know, it's a bit more tiring than the Psycho one sometimes. But like I said, I really enjoy it. Like, it's a lot of fun, and I think it's great practice, you know, keeping on top of that stuff. And I always find that's always been, like, I've always found it a struggle to try and play other people's songs, you know, like other people's style. You know, I find it way easier, like, if I'm writing stuff and I'm playing my own stuff, like, it's like not too much of a challenge for me. But that's kind of what I get out of the covers, you know, is like I'm learning other people's stuff and trying to play their style, and find that kind of a bit of a challenge, and it's a bit of fun. Like, with the cover band, I've always done the drums with that, but, you know, I've started playing a few gigs where I'm, you know, playing the guitar as well. So trying to hit a few different bases with that.
What's the name of the band, the covers band?
It's called Montage.
Of course it is. That's awesome. That's a great
name. Try to make it as 80s as we could, yeah.
Yeah,
but it's really good fun because it's my wife sings for it as well. So
lovely, nice.
It's good.
Family affair.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of our night out for the week.
Both sides for you. You know, you're with your brother in the extreme metal band, and you're with your wife in the covers band.
Yeah, it's good.
That's great, mate. Yeah.
She actually does a bit of vocals with the Psycho stuff as well. She's sung on the last 2 albums. You wouldn't. Yeah, it's not very obvious, you know, but she does a lot of the backing vocals, like the kind of big epic choruses and stuff. Like,
okay.
She's hidden in there doing. There's just a choir of Amy in there, which is kind of good.
I'll listen out for it. I haven't picked that up. I thought it might have been a guitar harmonica. I think that's what might have registered, because I wouldn't have expected, you know, a lovely female vocal to be as part of the band's sound. But there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, we try to approach it, and when we're doing it, we talk about it in that way that, like, you know, I think originally we were going to kind of play around with the idea of just having some, you know, some soft kind of keyboards or something in there, like in the background, to fill out, you know, this. On the last 2 albums, there's been a few, like, kind of more melodic sections, you know, in choruses, and that was kind of the first idea, was to, you know, to bring some keys or something in there, and we toyed around with the idea with Amy doing some vocals, and it worked pretty well. But that was kind of the approach. Like, it's still just layers of her to kind of get that sort of effect. So it still kind of sounds like a keyboard, but yeah, it's it just kind of adds another colour to it. So it's good.
That was one observation that I made about the Divine Council, is that it's still extremely brutally heavy shit. There's no doubt about that. But there's a bit of dynamism creeping in that I haven't heard in earlier albums. And I think that what you just explained there is part of the reason behind it. So you're obviously taking the band in direction. Forget about, it's not that you're introducing more melody or anything like that, but you're expanding the boundaries of Psycroptic.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, you know, I've had some people sort of talk about, like, when they're talking about, like, you know, our catalogue or whatever, they sort of say that, you know, you compare like the newer stuff to the older stuff, different. Like, you can tell it's like, you know, it's different, and we've kind of changed and evolved over time. But I think you can still tell it's the same band, you know. So it's
Definitely.
we've kind of maintained a particular kind of, you know, sound and approach to it all. But yeah, we're just kind of introducing elements and stuff like that, new elements. And I think on the last couple of albums, that's probably the biggest change and the biggest kind of experiment that we've done. We didn't know how it would go down at first. We thought, we'll just try it, see how it goes. But yeah, people seem to dig it. We kind of liked how it sounded. So we've kind of stuck with it for the last couple of releases. But we're never trying to, like, you know, we're never going to try and like force it into it if it's not kind of applicable. But there's just definitely been particular songs that, you know, I'll write a song, and if it's got that kind of flavour to it and big melodic sort of choruses, that we'll, you know, try some new stuff if it's applicable, you know.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm not so familiar with your deep back catalogue, all the deep cuts from like 1999 or year 2001 when I think your first album came out.
Yeah,
not so. How long have you? Are you talking about? Yeah, I'll get you saying. Sorry, my bad. but like I feel like as though this is the album. I'm talking about Divine Council, because you had the EP come out last year, I think it was, or the year before. And I thought, okay, here we go. It's there, because there were 2 or 3 songs on that one there. And I think Dicey sent that across, and I listened to that, and I thought, okay, really keen to see where you guys go on the next album. And I feel like as though, you know, I'm not one for grand statements, to say that a lot, but I do feel like as though this album here, The Divine Council, I feel like as though it's the definitive statement for the band so far. Like it's the album that you threatened to make, and now you've done it. Do you feel the same way?
I think so. I mean, we kind of, on the last full length, like on the Kingdom Drowns, that was sort of venturing into this territory. But I think, I guess you're right. Yeah, I think because that one was kind of venturing into kind of the realms of what this latest album is. But yeah, we were probably just kind of testing the waters more so on that, and it seemed to, at that point, we figured that it seemed to work. So. The new album, we just kind of went all in on, on these new sort of approaches and new kind of sounds, and just kind of, I think now we're not really, we're just kind of trying to do what we enjoy, like what we'd enjoy listening to, you know, trying to write music that we want to listen to. I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're not, we're getting too old to kind of worry too much about what people think. So we're just kind of doing what we like the sound of, and and I think it does make it sound. Well, I'm hoping it makes the album a bit more interesting overall, because I think it kind of dabbles in a few different, like, it feels like we're kind of covering all our bases on the new one. You know, there'll be like a thrash number, like a bit more of a slow kind of chunky number, and then more sort of melodic epic number. So that's kind of our approach these days, I guess.
The other thing too is you've made Guitar World. Now, you're probably like me in that you grew up reading Guitar World. I used to buy it as soon as I saw it on the news agency, but you're in it now. Is that a bit surreal?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, grew up, buying the magazines and learning all the tabs that were in the back of it. It's kind of, it's pretty crazy to kind of think about it, like, like that. I didn't even really think about it until you kind of mentioned it, but it's pretty crazy.
It's huge, mate. It's an enormous accomplishment, really, for an Australian guitarist. You know, we're not in that world over in North America. I know it's a lot flatter these days, but still, you're talking about, we grew up with Van Halen on the cover, even Hendrix is on every 3rd or 5th cover, and now you're in it. It's pretty. I'd bank that one, mate. I think it's an enormous accomplishment.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, no, it's good. Stoked.
Just talking about the Divine Council, for you, what are the album's highlights?
In terms of the tracks,
yeah.
put me on the spot here because I'm really unfamiliar with the track titles.
What number?
It's so fresh, that I go by just almost like working numbers, because in my mind all the tracks are called song 6, song 7, song 2, just the order that I've kind of written them and that kind of thing. But yeah, from what there is a couple of standouts for me, and it's probably the same with any album. It's always going to be the ones that are a little bit different, I think, to what we've done in the past. And it's always, it'll probably change over time, but I think a standout for me is, I think there's a song called Enslavement, Enslavement. I think that's one. It's a lot more of a orchestral kind of sounding song, which is way different to anything that we've done before. But that's why I like it, just because it's something different to what we've done. And I think Exodus kind of that's another one that I think we released a couple of weeks ago. That kind of dabbles with the same kind of orchestral sort of sound and all that sort of thing. Amy's pretty heavily featured on those tracks too. So
nice.
I think they're the standouts for me at the moment. But I always find that I change kind of my opinion on songs once we get up there and actually start playing them in front of people. So we haven't really had much opportunity to play them and see how they go live. I always find it's never it's never intentional, but I always find that my my standout tracks and my favorites of our material will kind of just change depending on kind of crowd reactions. Once we're sort of playing the songs and just seeing what songs the crowds kind of respond to, that tends to change my opinion of which songs I like. And it's probably just natural, once crowds get into, fans get into particular songs, you tend to just enjoy playing it. So so we'll see. My opinion could change in a couple of months' time, but at the moment, they're probably the two songs that I kind of like the most. Would be Enslavement and Exodus. And I can't remember the names of the other songs. So.
Exodus is a killer one. It's the last track on the album. Yeah, it's definitely worth waiting for that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. In terms of sharing ideas with your brother, how does it work? Do you use a software program to sort of tab everything out and send it through to him with a click track or what have you and say, hey, mate, do whatever you think you need to do? I'll preface my question by saying you don't write riffs in the traditional sense, do you? You write very intricate parts, but they sort of repeat, don't they?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like our situation is it's a little bit, I suppose a lot of people would be sort of in this situation now. None of us really, the only two of us that kind of live down here in Tassie are just me and Peppo, the singer. So in terms of writing the music side of things, we're all very separated, So Dave's over in Melbourne. I'm down here. Todd Stearns in New Jersey. I haven't seen him for 4 years. Actually, this weekend is the first time that I've actually seen him. Since when was it? Yeah, 2019. Yeah, so a few years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a while. We're pretty split up. So in terms of writing, it's kind of a unique situation. But in terms of writing the music, I tend to a lot of it kind of falls on me in terms of writing the riffs and stuff like that. Just not me trying to take control of writing stuff. It just makes more sense to do that rather than it just makes things way easier to do things that way. But so what I'll do is I'll usually sit down and kind of just come up with some ideas, and I'm also in a unique situation where I'm running a studio, so I don't have to really pay for studio time, at least, at in my own little studio.
Mm-hmm.
So I can kind of just, come in and just kind of lay down some ideas here and there and, leave it for a couple of days, come back and write some more or whatever. So really like the recording process and the writing process is all kind of taking place at the same time. So I'll just lay down a bunch of ideas and, it'll kind of like cut it up and like try different arrangements. And when I'm doing that, I'll be sort of, just programming kind of generic drums to it, just stuff that I think kind of works. And then once I've kind of got a song that I think sounds cool, I'll send it to Dave with like, I guess my ideas, but generally I'll just send it to him. Like I'll have my own ideas of the drums, but I'll send it to him just without him. So it'll just be the guitar with a click, and he'll just do his own thing. And it's usually way more interesting than what I can come up with. And it kind of makes it interesting because he may come up with something that's wildly different to what I came up with, and it'll change the sound of the riff. So even though I'm kind of writing a lot of the riffs and a lot of the the music to begin with, it takes this whole other form once Dave starts putting his parts over it. That's kind of generally how we've been doing it for the last couple of albums. Just kind of, and then once he's written his parts, and then we kind of get together and we'll just kind of record it and see how it goes. And then if any kind of arrangement changes need to be made, once the drums are on there, we kind of do that after the fact. So it's kind of interesting. So by the time we've finished, writing and recording, it's like a lot of bands will have like recorded an album and they'll be familiar with the songs, but in a lot of cases for us, like we'll have the album done, and then it'll be like, okay, now we need to learn the songs, because of arrangements have changed and everything. So it's kind of interesting like that.
How did it work with you guys growing up? Was it the usual Megadeth, Metallica, Into Morbid Angel and Deicide, and then your universe just expanded from there?
Yeah, very much. Like, so, I mean, I've always been way into like the thrashier side of things. But I think Dave was definitely the instigator of like, he got into metal first, like in a big way. And all kind of because he started learning drums first. Like he got into learning drums, and he was already into metal. And I guess I kind of wasn't really interested in, I guess, music in general at all, really. But his whole thing was just like, all right, you got to learn guitar because we need to start a band. He basically wanted me to learn guitar, so we had somebody to jam with.
Forced you into
it, pretty much. And just from that, I guess. I guess he just kind of got me into metal. I guess playing guitar got me into, got me listening to music, and obviously that went into metal. But that would have been, that was kind of the roots. Yeah, it would have been more the thrash kind of stuff. Like the first few songs I would have learned would have been like you said, Metallica songs and stuff like that. So definitely that kind of background. But Dave definitely was on a path to try and find the most brutal and absurdly obnoxious music that he could as soon as he could. So, yeah.
You're of a similar vintage to me, so surely you stumbled over Pungent Stench at some point. Those porno grind band sort of things, and those weird bands from the 90s that just sort of dropped off. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of never got into that sort of side of thing. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to know whether. I don't know if that was really Dave's cup of tea either, but definitely aware of them.
There was some weird shit around back then. Even Nuclear Blast had some pretty odd stuff out there, and I even some of that Absu stuff. I can't remember the name of the album now, but they look like Immortal on the back of the album cover. I was a huge Immortal fan and Deicide fan back then. I was probably similar to Dave in that I was trying to get into the most extreme and fast stuff as possible, especially
Dave's way into like the black metal, like in a big way. Like, he was way into it. He still is, like in a big way. So that's definitely like a big part of his, his musical sphere.
Yeah. Yeah, look, for a review of the 2018 edition of Download, I wrote that Psycroptic were easily the most, I'm reading here, by the way, easily the most extreme band I witnessed throughout the day, and guitarist Joe Haley wins the honorary Trey Exagtoth Shredder Award due to his accomplished performance. There you go. So was Trey and Chuck, were those two, did they have a big influence over the way you played?
I don't know, probably not so much as you would think, but probably more, I probably would have been more influenced by probably people that influenced them, you know. So I'm sure they would have been more influenced by kind of old kind of thrash guitarists and stuff like that. So probably, yeah, that probably spills over into my playing a lot. So there could be, you could hear similarities in that, I'd assume. Would just be, I guess, having a similar background or just kind of growing up listening to the same sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, it was interesting, yeah. But, I mean, I'm sure there are guitarists out there that sound like you or just haven't heard them, but nobody out there in extreme metal sounds like you from my ears. And that's why I'm interested in your answers to these questions, because it sounds as though it's very organic, the way in which you've approached guitar playing, and because you grew up with your brother and he's one of the preeminent extreme metal drummers globally, you got this situation where you're able to sort of link in with each other, and it just sort of, it happened very, like it was a linear progression for you. You went from thrash into sort of tech death, and now you're sort of even taking it far beyond that. Yeah,
well, it's kind of interesting because, like, so I think in terms of metal, like I was like, yeah, I was a lot more into like, you know, the thrash side of things and stuff like that. But I kind of, I definitely didn't just listen to, just metal kind of stuff, you know. So in terms of like guitarists, kind of, I guess in my teens and early 20s, I was kind of getting a lot more into the kind of the fusion side of things and listening to a lot of those kind of guitarists. And I have a lot of people ask me a lot of, always, inquiring about like my style with the whole legato thing and like the whole, what do you call it? Using the fingers, kind of doing the chicken picking kind of thing. And like I got a lot of that from, I'm a big fan of a guitarist called Brett Garsted, who's he plays for John Farnham. Like amazing. I'm actually a massive John Farnham fan, so I'm getting
good on you. Yeah.
I have I'm into a lot of different things, and but his style, even though it's totally different sort of things, definitely more rock kind of fusion kind of rock sort of stuff. But like he was a huge influence on my playing, and I feel like a lot of my technique and just kind of the way I approach playing guitar probably came from that more so than a lot of traditional kind of metal stuff. But I'm just assuming that because I got into the metal stuff and the thrash stuff a lot, and and the combination of that hybrid picking kind of thing, it probably made this weird sort of meld and this strange sort of style, which hopefully makes it sound a little bit unique to other people. But I'm assuming that's probably where the difference would come from, would just be just kind of listening to different sort of guitarists outside of the metal realm.
That's amazing. So you probably know bands like After Forever, Tower of Power.
Yeah, Tower of Power for sure.
I've spoken to Al Di Meola before for the podcast. Weather Report. These guys are magnificent. Yeah, I can't look. Metal fans, we tend to be agnostic. I find we tend to be able to get into all sort of music, but we come back to the home base, so to speak. It's one of the only genres I find where we're truly the fan. Or some fans aren't, but the musicians. I'll make that point. The musicians are very open-minded to what you just said there. John Farnham's. I can't even recall the guitarist's name that you mentioned there. Yeah, I have to check him out because Johnny surrounded himself with some magnificent musicians, didn't he?
Yeah, and he's pretty much had like the core band that he's got. It's pretty much been the same band since like '86. Wow. Like he's just had the same lineup. Brett Garsted was there from the start. and
I'll check him
same
out.
drummer, same. Yeah, it's like most of the band. It's the same band that he's just had the whole time, and yeah, they're banging players. It's awesome.
Ice House, they're doing Great Southern Land in full. I think it is with a symphony soon. Have you seen that? They're advertising that.
They played. They played down here kind of recently, and I think I think it was the same. It was that same gig. They were doing that whole album in full, but I didn't even know about it because I think it was a show that sold out years ago before COVID, and then it just kept getting postponed until I was just here at home. One night we could hear, because there's a place down here that's up on a hill that's just not too far from my house. A lot of the bigger concerts happen up there, and it's just open air. So you kind of just hear these bands, and you're like, I wonder what that is. And could just hear it was obviously Ice House, and we were like, what? We didn't hear anything about this. Then when we kind of researched it, we were like, that was a gig that was meant to happen years ago. But I'm assuming it was the same one where they were just playing that album.
Yeah, I bet you're getting to Chisel as well. Ian Moss is playing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love his vocals. Ian Moss, he's a great, everyone loves Barnsey, but I don't know, everyone kind of forgets about how good Mossy is.
I'm with you. I think his Saturday Night is one of my all-time favourite songs, and I've had to play it before, and it just gives me tingles listening to that. Yeah. And there's two parts to it.
Yeah, and he still sounds the same. Like you hear him now, still sounds as good.
I've spoken to the bloke who managed the local Cold Chisel show. I can't remember what it's called. They all tend to borrow song titles and call it the Cold Chisel Show, aka blah, blah, blah. But he was telling me how much trouble they were having finding a guitarist that could actually play like Mossy. It's virtually, I'm not saying inimitable, but to your point very early early on in the chat about, and I find it too, playing covers, it's so hard to nail exactly how somebody plays. But Ian Moss is just on a different level. Yeah.
He's just got such a, it's one of those ones where you kind of, to listen to it, you would assume, oh, yeah, I could play that. But there's just these weird intricacies in his playing that are real wacky and a little bit, really, really different. Yeah.
Yeah, the bass is
really hard to emulate.
Yeah, is it Phil Small, the bass player? Trying to nail I play 5-string, and I long ago switched across to 5, and a lot of that is because of players like Phil Small, because there's no tabs out there. It's not like you go on the internet and find the tab to Saturday Night or what have you. You've got to listen, through the Focusrite and bang
just
down
work
and
it out.
just figure it out. And it's like they're using chords. It's like they're doubling up so they're using octaves and fifths and stuff when they're playing. And I'm sure he's done that a lot of the time. But to mimic that sound, you've got to choose which one you think is dominant in the sequence, in the chord sequence, if you like.
Yeah.
And it can make for a pretty interesting night some nights when you throw in all of the usual, Pink and Jessie J, and then we're going into Saturday Night and Flame Trees. The bass on Flame Trees carries a song, and you've got to get that stuff. I mean, from a pride as a musician's perspective, you know what I'm talking about. You don't want to get it wrong. You can get up there and just play the 3 chords that are part of the song, but it doesn't feel right, does it?
Yeah. I mean, really, there's in Flame Trees, what is it? It's literally 5 chords in that.
I think so.
5 or 6 chords.
And in the middle 8, the thing,
Yeah.
They're all like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just all the little fills, just the little fills, and like you said, the bass carrying a lot of it. There's a lot of the melodies in the bass lines for a lot of those older songs. That's actually something that I've kind of more recently, kind of earlier on with us with the Psycroptic stuff, and I think a lot of bands, a lot of metal bands, a lot of rock bands have the same approach where it's like, the bass players are just there just to fatten out the guitar, and they'll just play the same stuff as the guitarist, but on the bass, just like the bass notes or whatever. But it's kind of just the last few years where I've really started appreciating the bass lines a bit more, and trying to experiment with like different inversions on the bass, trying to make the bass do its own thing a little bit more. And it makes for some for a lot more interesting kind of songs, and a lot more interesting flavors.
Yeah, from what I can pick up, you're playing bass in the second position, so in the octave a lot of the time, and you're sort of inverting it that way. Is that correct?
With the Psycroptic stuff. So we've kind of done a weird thing. We've recently, like you said, how you've kind of gone to the 5-string. I think which album? Probably the last 2 albums that we were running like 4-string for years. Just matching the guitar. So we run the guitar. It's drop D tuning. And the bass was the same, just drop D. But then we added the fifth string. So we've got a bit of a weird tuning where I've done drop. It's a drop A and a drop D.
Okay.
So we tend to do a lot of anything that kind of goes up to the when the riffs kind of go to the A string, like on the guitar, we'll make the bass jump down to the octave below.
Yeah.
Which I've found that's a kind of interesting approach, and just kind of fattens it out, and it kind of just makes the riff sound a bit more wacky too. It kind of trips you up because it sounds like a riff kind of or runs ascending, but then it's kind of confusing because it sounds like it's kind of going down at the same time because the bass will jump down.
You're right. I've heard that with your stuff. Yeah, it's like what's that artist that does the staircases that are inverted? The staircases like they're upside down and shit. Your music's a bit like that. Yeah. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, David Bowie from Labyrinth. The scene where he's doing that in the staircases. Yeah.
Yeah.
With this might be a Dave question, but just with Prosthetic Records, look, they do release some killer stuff, but they're predominantly North American based, if I understand that correctly. I would have, and it does give you reach into North America, which of course is where I know for the podcast, well over half the people that listen to me are from North America. Fantastic to have that reach into there, but Europe's huge as well. Has Marcus and Atomic Fire, or even the Nuclear Blast guys, have they sort of reached out and just sort of had a chat to you at all, ever?
That's definitely a Dave question. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a weird, I kind of feel like these days we're sort of in a weird realm, just industry wise, like trying to work out, how things actually operate, in terms of like the world's getting smaller for everybody. People can kind of.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
With the whole Spotify era and people doing stuff themselves, and like singles have become a lot more commonplace. Like that's kind of the approach that most people, at least in the the other kind of the other areas, in music and stuff like pop and stuff, they just tend to release singles and stuff rather than albums, and it just seems like the metal world is kind of the only kind of realm, or one of the few realms that are still just doing the album cycle, still doing an album, tour on it, do an album, which I prefer. I reckon it's way cooler, but in terms of like what that means for labels, I'm totally like unsure of like how all that sort of works. It's totally not my field. I definitely leave that up to Dave with that kind of stuff, because I can't get my head around like how things are being approached and how you're kind of meant to approach things. I don't know if the rest of the world is as confused as me with it all. It just kind of feels like we're all just in a bit of a transitional stage where we don't know. Do we do albums? Do we do singles? Don't know. So yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah, look, the through the many conversations that I've had on the podcast, it seems like as though we're venturing into a world where it's about content. So make of that what you will. Content for social media, YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, fucking TikTok. I mean, isn't that a dastardly bloody thing?
Yeah,
Twitter.
and we're terrible. And I mean, people that people of our generation and stuff like that. It's like we're terrible at it. Like we're so bad with social media and so bad with like content and all that kind of stuff. So I guess labels are definitely still relevant for us because we kind of need them to do it for us because we're hopeless. So yeah.
Well, you guys have been going for 20 plus years, almost 25 years now. Can you believe it? Given you started in '99.
Yeah, it's insane.
When you've seen a lot of change in the industry, I mean, you probably did your first few recordings, at home. I'm talking about on 4-track like I did as a kid too. You're just playing around with the 4-track and overdubbing and using a drum machine, a Zoom drum machine, or whatever it might have been, a physical thing, not an app or a piece of software. And these days, it's there you go.
Yeah. I think I left playing into a tape deck, recording onto that with another guitar part. They end up with to try and overdub. It's just like just turns into mush after like about 4 guitars that you can barely hear.
Yeah, just get tape hiss back at you after a period of time. Yeah, that infamous, depending on the quality tape. I think there was metal heads, weren't they? They were the better ones to use, but they were shorter. They're only 30 minutes, if I remember right.
Oh, yeah, there was a whole
different
science
world
to it.
There's a whole different world back then, and if you were lucky to have an SM58 or something like that, Andy, you could hear the difference rather than remember those Dick Smith mics you could buy, like the Radio Shack mics and stuff you could buy.
Yeah,
and depending on it, I mean, I remember doing my first demo live in a rehearsal studio. It wasn't even a thought to go into a recording studio with someone like yourself, but Ian Redmond, don't you? You've recorded with him before. He's our sound guy. When he's available, he's the guy we use. So. Isn't he a fantastic fella, Ian? I've got to say, he recorded Cross Trigger. I was in Cross Trigger years ago, and I guess I still am. We never sort of officially broke up or anything, but he's just a lovely fella to work with, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's like got to be the most chilled out dude I know. He never panics. He's like calm and reserved and in control. I think that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, just for people listening, if you go to a metal show on Crowbar or Brightside, chances are Ian's behind the desk there. He's pretty much the go-to for a lot of touring bands, I think, and I've seen him at a bunch of shows. And one thing I'll say about Ian is that it might be years in between when I've seen him, but he always says hello. I mean, if we can, we always say hello. If we cross paths, he's not one of those guys who sort of pretends he doesn't know you or whatever, and he's got better things to do. He's just a nice guy like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Mate, I'll make this one my last question for you. Just given how accomplished you are on the guitar, the success you've had, being able to ply your trade as a musician, I mean, you got all the bases covered, really. They're really multifaceted there with the covers, with Psycroptic, with the studio work you're doing. What would be the piece of advice that you would go back in time and give to yourself when you were starting out, when you were sort of 16 and 18 and you're just green to the world?
Oh, God. Jeez. I don't know, really. I don't know. I think I did all right.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Especially being from Hobart, mate. I mean, it's one thing coming from Brisbane or Sydney or Melbourne, but Hobart, it just adds that layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Especially earlier on, it was trickier, kind of, a bit more isolated and stuff like that. So it made stuff a bit trickier to begin with, but don't know. That's an interesting one, something I've never really thought about. So.
I said something to Gary Beers from In Excess when I spoke to him for the podcast. I said, you are the most listened to Australian bass player ever, and he stopped and he goes, yeah, you're probably right. It was just one of those weird things. But you're probably Tasmania's biggest ever musical export.
Yeah.
In terms of people listening to you and in terms of prominence and stuff. I mean, I was trying to think who else there could be, but I could be. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but I just couldn't think who it might have been. Who else might be there?
There's been I think we were probably one of the earlier sort of bands to kind of get out, to kind of get noticed outside of Tassie. But yeah, I think recent years there's been a few in different fields, not so much metal. I'm kind of talking overall. There's been, a few artists coming out from here that are doing really well. Like some guys I know, the Wolf Brothers, they're pretty big. They're getting really big in the country scene. They've been backing Lee Kernaghan for years.
Oh yeah,
but
nice.
Getting really big in their own right. A good mate of mine, his son actually is absolutely crushing it with the whole EDM thing. I think he just released he did a remix that just went gold or platinum or some shit. But
different world.
But yeah, it's like it's like what we're talking about. I guess the world's getting smaller, and I think it's kind of made it easier for people to kind of get out there and do that sort of thing. So, but yeah, definitely early on, I think we, one of the few bands that were kind of pushing to try and get off the island a bit.
It's interesting reading the offshore publications. You're not Australian, you're Tasmanian. I don't know whether surely they must know that Tasmania is the state of Australia, but it's always.
Oh, we've actually had some people, even Australian people, in the past.
Oh my God!
Assume that Tassie was a different country. It's really.
Oh my God!
Yeah, but yeah,
that's shocking. Yeah, that's just ignorance. That's just an Australian not understanding although the newspaper, I'm a journo, right? So the Australian did call the ACT a state the other day, and I was like, okay, here we go. Where the hell did they get their degree from? Canberra ain't a state, it's a territory. So you read this stuff, and it just. I mean, I'm definitely not a grammar Nazi either. He's Grammarly. Even I use some software to help me with that. But I think if you're in the field, you got to get it right. It's like playing a bum note. Fix it.
That's it.
Well, it's been a fantastic chat, man. It's really been lovely to finally catch up with you. Actually, I meant what I said. When I was watching the band back in 2018 at Download, you were it was very early in the day, as you can probably remember, but you were one of the outstanding bands of that entire festival. I mean, with bloody Limp Bizkit and all that shit that was on there, and then you guys are on so early, and it just proved to me that you can make music. You can stand within your own truth, as it were, musically, and you can still perform before thousands of people like you do.
Yeah, cheers. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so cool, mate. Well, look, good luck with the tour with Scott and the lads. I'm sure it'll be an absolute cracker, mate. I know that looking at the social media comments, mate, they're just universally positive about what their people have heard about the new album, Divine Council, and I'm sure, mate, that the fans will just flock to it in North America, and I'd love to see you guys up here sometime soon as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, cheers. Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, it should be great.
No worries, mate. All right, thanks very much for the chat. Really appreciate it.
Cool. No worries.
Thanks, bro. No worries.
Cheers.
There you have it. That was a chat featuring Joe Haley from Psycroptic. What a humble fella. I've noticed something over the years. The more capable people are, generally speaking, not in every instance, but generally speaking, certainly in this case here, the easier they are to actually talk to about things. They're a bit of an open book. Talent, it seems, and humility, well, don't a combination they make. Joe Haley, again, ladies and gents, from Psycroptic. Now, if you like that chat, there are plenty more just like it over at scarsandguitars.com. You might even like to check out my series dedicated to Cradle of Filth. I'm in the process of trying to have a chat with Danny Filth again. about the old days. I talk about the old days, people, the 90s era of the group. That's where my fascination lies with the band. And maybe if you like listening to the podcast and even those Cradle of Filth episodes, you will like reading about the podcast and Cradle of Filth, because I've written a book and there are many entries. Cradle of Filth feature amongst the pages Scars and Guitars, conversations from the world of hard rock, heavy metal and beyond. Click on the link in the banner on the website. It'll take you to a marketplace. You can download a sample. And if you do complete the purchase, do hit me up, because I want to thank you in person. Now, I've got a bit more to tell you about the book, which I'll do so in a moment. But before I let you go to that, I'll bid you a fond farewell. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast series. Please do stick around, because I've pre-recorded something that I think you might like to listen to about my book. See ya.
This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
You know, if you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, you know, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, you know, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
You know, my name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.